and welcome to the SUSE QE Tools Workshop on this Friday, the 25th of November 2022. Today, as a topic, I would like to talk with you about test coverage decrease prevention. Let me start to open a discussion with a poll. So you should be able to find the poll in the Jitsi poll section now. And welcome to answer. What do you think about OpenQA test coverage best practices? Like, in particular, should we prevent the decrease or something? Option number one, this is you can choose multiple. Option number one would be, yeah, it's an important problem. There's no good solution yet. Second option that you could answer would be no problem. There are too many tests anyway, so who cares if we lose some tests or lose some modules or some code is never executed. Option number three would be I know all tests by heart. No decrease evades my keen eyes. So you have everything in your head and have a good overview, and you would see immediately if something would some test wouldn't be executed anymore, and maybe for good reason. Option number four would be let's just check job templates in Git and prevent any decrease in CI jobs. Of course, the list isn't really complete. I just brainstorm some options to start the discussion. So
Can you elaborate a little bit, what do you mean OpenQA test coverage?
Yeah, so what I mean with OpenQA test coverage is OpenQA conducts tests, right? And what we want to do there is cover certain aspects of the products that we want to test. And the question is it actually a problem that maybe, have 1,000 tests and one day for whatever reason you have less tests and then you assume the tests are there, but they aren't, and you release bugs because, the tests are not actually executed? Or is it not really a problem because of some reason that you want to real? And if it would be a problem, how do we approach that, right? So I see that there are some answers already. Thank you. That's good. Every idea that just starts with let's just is always a good idea by nature. Yeah, I think so as well, right? Let's just do something. What can go wrong, right?
So is it about how much the test on OpenQA cover from the product, or is the test
yeah, that would be a start. And then if you say you have a certain percentage of the product covered or a number of customer use cases, right? Then the question is, how would you realize if maybe by accident, maybe someone is doing changes to the code and to the job templates, and suddenly some tests are not executed anymore. Maybe they're bound to a certain medium. Like, in OpenSUSE Tumbleweed, we have the DVD and we have net installer and we have microOS. What if the net medium wouldn't trigger any tests anymore and just DVD? So that would be like 1/3, or how many is it? I don't know. How many tests less? Would you realize that? How would you realize that? Anybody is thinking of maybe an automatic monitoring solution, right? And that would be on the level of the test schedule, but it could also be that within one scenarios, modules are not executed anymore because maybe somebody changed this main PM file or is using other means to schedule tests, and then maybe it's a bit more complicated logic to say if this and that, then execute test modules or not. And then suddenly this condition is never true. How would you realize that those test modules are never executed? Going one level further into the test modules, there could be test code, which can also be not just straightforward, but some procedural if-else decisions. And maybe if that condition is never true, so you would effectively have that code which is never executed. Yeah, so Pavel stated, I always wonder why that line is sometimes shorter in build overview. So, let me shortly share my screen. So when we go to a build overview, like now I'm opening group number 1, tumbleweed, and you see that you have this build line. So you could say, well, maybe for you it's just important to look at a number of failed ones. Maybe it is important to look at the past ones because that really defines what is actually covered. But maybe it's also important to look at this gray part here. So for example, here we had an example where 3 tests are not executed. And there can be even examples, I'm not sure if you find them. Well, effectively, if we would look back into time, then we will find all the examples where the build bar is actually not completely filled. So those 3 jobs here, they're skipped probably because of some dependency wasn't there. But if you take a look here, looking back for 100 jobs, there was a time when there were more tests. And then suddenly there are less tests. There's like 15 tests less or 16 tests less. So why is that? Was that
Oliver,
intended? Yeah,
I sent a link to the. By the way, hello. I sent the link to a chat. It's just a job overview. It's from OpenQA SUSE QE,
right.
but
Let's
it's
take a look
just
at that.
job overview, and it's like I think it does not reveal anything confidential, and it's
Fine.
very visible that the you know the lines are like all over the place.
Exactly. So what does that mean? Does that mean that this is intended less tests than in before, or was it intended to have the build bar completely filled? So what we see here is that different versions of the products are tested, like the different service packs, and there's also major code stream. And apparently, it's not the same number of tests that we run for all the versions. Well, what we can do is we can compare 15 as before with 15 as before, and we see if we have 40 plus 14 is 54 tests, and up here it's actually the very same number. It's also 54. So there is no sudden decrease from yesterday to today within that version pack, but still, does it make sense to have um, less tests running in the previous versions? Is this by intention? Is it an accident? Or, yeah.
In this scenario, it I think does, because also there is different like machine types. This is public cloud, right, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So it's not like error in this case. It's just very visible here.
Exactly. So,
That's basically
what I would like to exchange with you guys, because honestly, this might be a bit disappointing, but now I don't have a magic solution that would be able to answer all these questions every day. So this is why I want to work with you in this workshop to first collect your thoughts about, is it a problem? Is it not a problem? If it is a problem, how do we address that? What are best practices to handle that? Like how do you make sure this works for a product which is not that big? Maybe it's really that when you take a look every single day, you will remember and you would realize. But how does it work in your daily life? So anyone would like to share, Dimster? Right?
Yeah, let me just go off. So I see two distinct problems basically. One is the total number of jobs being scheduled, which we
Yeah.
see in those nice bars. There for Tumbleweed, we actually have a solution which actually also triggered the bug I just filed a couple days ago where we missed 2 jobs running. 2 is not very much considering we have something like 300 running.
Could be
Uh,
important ones, right?
Could be, yet,
Yeah.
I mean, it was only 2 and we realized this. And this case we actually solved using a test manager where we give it a number of how many tests do we expect to run.
Yes.
And as soon as that number goes under, it says, well, I can't release this snapshot because the number of tests running does not match my expectation.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's actually the approach I took for Hack Week project Tumblesly as well, where I didn't take a look at the failed tests, but I looked at the past tests. But
Actually,
then
we just look at the total number. I expect 213
yeah,
tests running. If I get less scheduled than that, then something must have gone wrong in syncing that snapshot over.
right. That's a good test. So let me and I think that's a very good approach. But then the immediate question would be like, well, what if it's actually intended to remove some test cases? How would you handle that?
Then the publisher just won't go out, and then I have to figure out why are now tests missing, like I had to do for those two. And if the new number is correct, then I have to adjust TTM's expectation in the attribute.
So
I can
that's
tell it newly that,
same,
well, 300 is now good enough.
right? So it's same like with this command, you would be able to adjust a new reference number, right? Yeah, I think that's pretty cool idea. Sure.
Well, it's not in the ignored issues, but it isn't just a different attribute,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, I know, like
the,
another attribute.
It's the to-test manager configuration for that. But works pretty well like this. I mean, we spotted two tests missing, which actually pointed to a QA issue, which is being tracked at the moment. That's the easy one to detect. The more difficult one is if a test suite actually no longer executes any module which we were expecting and sort of relying on.
Right. So that would be like, you know, within here, if
Right.
suddenly journal check wouldn't be executed anymore, then you wouldn't track that bug,
Exactly.
and you
Then
would
at once
assume
it goes away, and we don't see it. Those are much more difficult to see, and I don't have a solution for those.
yeah. Right. Good. For sharing the approach with two test manager, good for, you know, sharing that you also see that the problem on a different level. So what are the experience or suggestions by others then? Phoenix, go on.
Just as a complementary view, I typically do this that I believe that I know how our test cases should look like. And just looking at the numbers of the test runs here is in our use case not useful. But if you click on the individual versions, then you will see that we just have a couple of flavors. And every flavor is kind of having, just take one of them.
Yeah. So pick 15 SP1.
Yeah,
that
you always have this quadruple except for the C hosts, and it's kind of easy to see if one of them is missing or not because the signature is really the same. But I do this visually. The the thing that I wanted to add to this discussion is that I really like Dimstar's approach, but I wonder if this scales for the case of OSD, where we have really a lot of different things scattered on different squads. It appears to me like a solution that works as long as you are the only one that has a control over the product or that has the review of a product. But when you are sharing the review, let's say responsibility with other people, and you share different job groups with other people, you're kind of having a couple of new problems that you have to solve. It becomes more difficult there.
Yeah. Weiter.
Yeah, I kind of agree with both of you, Dimster and Phoenix. So actually, since I was responsible for product development, I kind of did it visually on the higher level. So I was looking at the dashboard, OpenQA SUSE DE, and I could see the bar there. And actually, since I checked them every day, it was pretty clear to me if some major changes have happened. Nice example is, for example, migration job groups appeared and disappeared depending on the milestone. But this is something that you have to know, to not be surprised. And of course, I relied on the fact that I was assuming that every PO knew his own group. So, for example, let's take the first functional. I assume that the functional PO Santiago is checking his bar, but I was checking kind of the overall bar and also the groups. So on this dashboard. And here, I mean, for example, let's say migration HA, you see a lot of skipped here for the last build. Things like this happen quite often. But if you look at this on a daily basis, or let's say every 2 days, yeah, you see the changes. But it's of course, it's pretty error prone. On the one side, it's not like a test manager who gives you a sign. I mean, having it automated is maybe more safe on the one side. On the other side, if you have a bug or you haven't thought about every scenario, you might miss something with the bot. That's always the pro and con for automation.
Right.
Yeah, Felix.
Yeah, so in, you know, an important lesson from psychology is that humans are pretty good to spot something new which pops up, like, you know, if you have a rabbit sitting in your garden, then you would realize something is new. But if something disappears and is not there, what normally should be there, that's pretty hard to see. I would imagine if you do that like every day, check the results, then you would realize that there must be a certain pattern, and but still would struggle to detect if something isn't there. Phoenix?
Very good. Marita actually triggered to me in another direction that I wanted to add here. I am not so much afraid of losing a couple of flavors or versions or something like this, because this is something that will pop up in the reviewer's mind very soon. You
Yeah.
have less work for the day, and you are done earlier than you expect, and you just ask yourself, what the heck is going on here? Or the thing what I'm afraid of, if you trigger, or if the bot triggers are ISO exposed, then it always returns this JSON object that tells you how many jobs have been scheduled. And there is this list of jobs that have been failed to schedule.
Yes.
And I'm always afraid that we lose those because no one checks them. When the bot releases them, and there is, for instance, in the job groups, I'm just making an example up, there would be 5 jobs that need to be scheduled there. And 4 are being successful, but 1 is for some reason invalidly defined. This is an error that no one would detect.
Right.
And I would really like to have an option in OpenQA of make sure that all of them can be scheduled and otherwise reject. Like, not even try with the 4 successful ones. If one of them is invalid, just reject it, because this will kind of this increases the visibility of the things.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I like that approach. Like, fail hard in a way that, you know, is immediately obvious to people. It's like, hey, something fell to schedule, rather than trying to do the best we can, which is like 90%, rather don't do anything. And then people would ask immediately, like, hey, something must be missing, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, cool idea. Janis?
Right now, I think the only mechanism is the responsibility to the squads, right? This is where we relate. But I feel like the problem is that there is no. We try to solve it in OpenQA and discuss it in OpenQA level, but actually we lack of a monitoring tool or something. For example, I was thinking that the QA metrics project, and it could be helpful if we have statistics there and some alarms to trigger specific filters to trigger specific alarms when something is not there. So you have an overview with monitoring and, you know.
Right. I think there are different approaches, different implementation approaches to the same problem. At first, what we could decide is how to approach the how to approach the problem in a generic way, and then decide, is that something that we want to implement within OpenQA, which would be maybe the most streamlined solution, but also most restricted, because, you know, you kind of hard code that into the system and you cannot be that flexible. Or do you want to use some, let's say, some hybrid way? So what the two test manager does, it, you know, it also sets this build tag here, so it reads the OpenGA results and then evaluates those, but feeds back the result by, you know, telling which job was ignored for a release or not. Or it could be a completely independent way, like what QEM bot does for sleep maintenance tests, where when they, you know, the results you would effectively see in the build service, where in build service release requests are either approved or not. I think it's possible for all of those ways to do. In general, we try to, you know, support more that external tooling like ToTest Manager or QEM bot, can use the OpenQA API to solve that question rather than prescribe one solution within OpenQA itself, right? One specific question which I have to you guys is, for example, for QAM bot, which you just mentioned, that's used for the maintenance test, and the criterion what QAM bot does is it just looks at failed tests. So, you know, one approach which I could think of is to use what we used in that Tumbleslee prototype, or what Dimster said that two test manager is doing, to say, actually, we can take a look at the total number or the number of passed ones in combination with failed would be the same result, is to say there must be this number of tests scheduled. If not, then maybe it might be intended, but then at the very least we would need the confirmation by a user to say, yes, I know, we optimized our schedule. This is why we have 10 tests less than this is expected. What do you think about that approach?
Just my 2 cents, if you ask. It sounds like conceptually a good approach, but I'm afraid it doesn't scale with the dynamics of the test runs, because they change rather a lot. And
yeah,
you have to change them 2 places, and I'm afraid that this will be just a pain for the reviewers.
right. So then let's try another example, which would be what Marita mentioned. This, so for product validation, you see 15 SP5, build 51 currently in testing. We could take a look at the total number here. Of course, we can also make it per job group, and then that number would need to be defined somewhere. Could be in some external Git repository with metadata information. It could be in the job group description, like up here, saying the lower limits that needs to be ensured to be working. And then, of course, we would need proper feedback for any kind of automation to say, hey, I couldn't approve the build because the expected number of jobs weren't found. It needs manual approval, right? It could also be combined on both levels, like the total numbers plus the individual job groups. You think that would help? Weiter?
Well, it wouldn't work for this setup as it is at the moment, because you can see build 50 is a little bit shorter. Can
Yeah.
you see that?
Yeah.
And the reason is that we have a job group migration milestone, I think it's called, which is only switched on after a release of a milestone into SCC.
Yeah.
And
right.
then your concept wouldn't work, or you make big exceptions, like after a milestone was released and this was triggered, the number is like this, and if not that, yeah, or yeah, you change this approach. Yeah.
I'm sure it would mean that by definition some things need to be handled differently. For example, it would mean that milestone release tests, like those example, would need to go into another job group, or it needs to be mentioned as one specific example, where you don't compare the number per build but only per milestone, or maybe you exclude a certain job group from the evaluation in total.
Yeah, exclude would make sense, because otherwise it would get complicated, because you have candidates, and then candidates are rejected and approved, and when they're approved, they are released, and then they are real milestones. Yeah. But there is a way around for this, yeah. But the question is also here, I mean, we get many builds, and some are candidates and some are just in between builds, and then there is nothing like a go or no go for a build, only for a milestone candidate.
Yes, of
is
course.
needed.
So it's
Yeah,
not
so
like a clear do we release or not criterion, and also that would be changing. So I see it more like additional information, but of course that additional information would need to be included in the evaluation. Like if we would have that, a monitoring check or anything, and then it would fail, who would take a look at the number and what would be the consequence, right? Because if nobody would care, then yeah, why do that? Janis first, please.
Yeah, I don't have clear way to say to provide an idea, but I was thinking that from the total number of the bar of the total test, pretty much this is the application of modules. What if you could measure the module that you expect there to uh, be run? And
Okay. So you would say we don't actually need to care about the jobs because we can just take a sum of all the modules, right?
yeah, because for example, the functional, all these, most of them, they're gonna use, for example, the installation boot to desktop, right? Is like it's one module by I don't know how many jobs. So what do you expect is like one module that um, actually should be run at in whatever run,
Yeah.
right? Like the total number doesn't matter, but the module has actually like if you test Firefox module, it should be like you expect Firefox, for example. I don't know. Uh, I'm okay. I'm stuck, but you understand what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Okay. Phoenix.
Um, I don't know where to start with this one. I'm just going to start where Dimstar left. I think the adequate place for such a check would be in an external manager that tries to release the product. So this means the solution should be outside of OpenQA because
Okay.
otherwise it's just OpenQA testing itself. And that is not a good idea because if you're missing something on the level of the job groups, those tests would not be detected. So
Right.
the only way of really closing the loophole is that this is a check outside of the definitions of OpenQA. And there are only two ways how I think you can approach this. Or with a job number that you define as you suggested, Oliver, in the job groups, but not as part of the job definitions, but as something independent from them, so that you have actually an independent check of the things. For instance, that you can define here that functional should have 180 test runs. And whenever functional or a test run for a single build is not having this one, then something is displayed on the list on which you are actually looking right now.
Uh-huh.
A second possibility would be in the bot ng. And I'm looking now at the metadata, but I'm kind of failed to find a good spot. We are mostly looking just at the aggregate test runs. And one should have a look if it is possible to add there an optional argument like, I don't know, expected job numbers, and the bot just refuses to release any incidents if this number is not met. But this is just an idea. I would not know if this would work. The point that I want to push here is what Dimstar said before. The check should happen outside of OpenQA. Otherwise, it's just OpenQA testing itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a valid approach. A safety net, second level check, something that would even alarm if OpenGA would be down or not schedule any build, because then you could say like, well, I'm expecting a build today with like 2,500 jobs, and maybe the build wasn't scheduled correctly, maybe it wasn't scheduled at all, and do we wait for some project manager to realize like, hey, the page is empty, or would we be able to alarm about that based on some expectations like, there's a new build, why is it not tested yet, and why does it not meet the number of jobs that we expect, right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So do you guys think that's something that we should put into, I could think of a GitLab pipeline. Like what we, let me show you. So bot-ng is the project that is executing QEM bot mentioned here for SLE maintenance releases. And what that one does in the pipelines or in the jobs, you can see. So it's every couple of minutes there's something going on, which is evaluating the results from OpenQA, going over those results, feeding new data like new incidents to be tested, and then also approving results based on approving incidents based on test results. So, we could include it in one of those checks, or we could add another step to say, make that a cross check. Now I wonder, how would one be able to integrate that into workflows? Because what we are doing in the SUSE QE Tools team is I made sure that it's a mandatory task for SUSE QE Tools team to be notified if any of those jobs fail. Like if there's some programmatic error in QAM bot or OpenQA, or one of the services is not reachable for whatever reason, then effectively we will receive a message. Okay? And the message is treated the very same as alerts from other pipelines, as from Grafana when some performance figures are not met. Now I'm a bit hesitant to say that we would have another pipeline that would fail if the target numbers are not met, because members of the SUSE QE Tools team, they may be experts in QEM bot and OpenQA, but they're not experts in what actually is tested on it. So how do you think we would be able to incorporate something like that into daily workflows of QA engineers, either working on product validation or on SLE maintenance update testing? Do you think we are able to achieve that? On let's say we would have one pipeline, and that pipeline would check that the number of scheduled tests stays the same or stays above a threshold. Who would be notified if that pipeline fails, and how would you act on it? Phoenix?
Can I go for a very long shot here?
Okay.
How I envision, this is a vision, but how I envision we could improve the workflow is by moving the interactions away from external bots and to integrate this in OpenQA.
Yeah.
A way of addressing this would be to introduce a new concept that is called maybe something like blockers. And those blockers could be assigned by the bot for every anomaly. That can be a test failure, that can be a number of test runs that not reaches a certain threshold, and reviewers should be able to unblock those blockers within OpenQA. That, for instance, in the page where you have there, I get an exclamation mark with a number that says 15SP4 has 3 blockers. And if you click then on one of the builds that you have here, just pick, I don't know, any of those.
Yeah, I could select those 6 failed, and let's one. It's a might sound a bit hacky, but I would envision that the blockers or the check failures, the metadata check failures, would appear in a similar list, maybe the same, even maybe different flavor and such. Okay.
Exactly, but you do not alter the test results. We just simply are not looking at the test results anymore. We are just looking at the blockers.
Yes.
And blockers could be resolved by reviewers then, where a reviewer just says, this blocker, ignore, this blocker is being resolved. With this, we don't have to fiddle around with forced test results and everything, and reviewers get presented actually actionable items that they need to review at the end of the day. This also would make the review much easier because you just can go through the list of blockers that you see per every day, and you don't have to check every individual test run or every individual job groups. Plus, the interaction happens also within OpenQA, and you don't have to deal with comments, manual retriggers, whatever. But you can just unblock blockers there, and that is basically all what you have to do there. This can incorporate test failures. This can incorporate numbers of test runs that are not being matched. This can incorporate test runs that are not being scheduled. It could become a generic object within OpenQA that allows people to interact with OpenQA directly instead of relying on external tools. But as I said, this is a long shot.
Yes, but it meets my vision, so I think it's pretty reasonable approach. But maybe I understand it differently. So let me try to check if I got you right. So what one can do already checking test results in OpenQA is you have what I would say pretty good ways how to find those results, filter them, and show overviews. And then if you go into the individual test results, you're able to investigate them and find more background about them. And then within OpenQA, you're able to use comments or special comments to, to handle them. For example, force result or add the specific marker to tell QM bot that, yeah, we know about this issue, it's being handled, and provide some bug reference here for explanation. So I know that people would, like to be more lazy, and I understand that, and that's fine to say, I don't want to write any text or find a bug reference. I just want to click the fix it button or the retry button. In some cases, it kind of, air quotes here, fixes stuff. So maybe you're thinking of like a checklist where you can just click open checkbox to say, yes, I know the target number is not met, still go ahead. And anyway, but I think we need to make it mandatory. We need to demand from people to say, no, you can only override the check with at least a valid ticket reference or something. So, which effectively is what we do here. Write a comment, and then that would be accepted either by OpenQA or by QMBot. Is that what you're thinking, or we're thinking of something different?
This goes in the right direction, but it misses 2 points here. If you click on details on this test run,
yeah,
then you can interact only on the whole test run. And I'm envisioning, for instance, if you have 2 failures in here, then you get 2 blockers. And then you can unblock every one of them. And this gives already the signal, okay, part of the problem has been addressed, but the other part is simply, or is still there. This is something that you can't do with the comments, because on the comments, you can only apply actions on the whole test run. This is the first part that would be missing there. Might be a minor issue, but it's still there. And the second problem, we can do this, but the second thing, what I'm missing here, is the feedback to the overall job groups.
Right.
As I said before, we have about 300 or more test runs per day. And if we are just interacting on the base of comments, then at the end of the day, I do not get any feedback, okay, which of the ones did I work on and which ones not, because the overview will stay exactly the same. While this works, if I know I only have 3 failures that I have to react on this, if I have 20 or 50 failures per day, and there are days where you have them, I completely lose the overview. So this works from the perspective of handling failures on the individual job level, but it fails to be a solution, or it misses still a solution or a feedback to address or to give an overview if you have really a multitude of failures for a whole
okay wait, the idea here is that I can just write a plain comment like I don't know, needs to be checked, right? So this is just just a plain comment. And now let me put into another job. Let's come up with a label where we know it doesn't have an effect now, but for purpose of visualization, workshop 42 approved. Yeah. And if I do that, and then let me refresh the overview page here. And now what you see is you can distinguish. This is just a plain comment. So you know, like, somebody has looked into that and done something, but you need to check the specific results, right?
This is not useful.
In other cases, like you have a bug reference, and here what you have is a label, and what you can't see is that there's a pop-up showing label workshop 42 approved. So we actually see that those are different.
That's still not useful because issues typically persist over multiple days, and there is the automatic takeover, which is really useful.
Yes.
And therefore, you don't see which ones have been automatically takeover and which ones you have been already going through. Just imagine you're going exactly through this one. You have 50 failures. 20 of them have been already labeled.
Yeah.
The other 20 you have to label yourself. But you don't know which ones of the labeled ones you have to actually recheck because the label has been just taking over. You kind of really need individual action points per test runs.
Yeah. So I feel like there's something, let me say it like that. There's something really wrong in how the according bugs and issues that are used as labels are used behind that daily review. So I can offer that we can talk about this, at a later time, maybe like after this workshop, because I'm really interested in to dig into that further and see if we can actually solve that on the level of OpenGA or if there's something else. But let's first let others come to word. So Marita, you raised your hand before. You can use opportunity now, but if you like, yeah, Marita, go first.
Just one comment. I mean, as I said, I used to look at this on a daily basis, but I can tell you, even looking into this, I get already confused with all this labeling and stuff and comments and whatnot. So for me, it was important to say there is a bug or there is a little flashlight, the good old flashlight bug. I consider I knew it's a bug or test case issue. All this commenting here and labeling there that created, I mean, just saying the more automatic stuff you put behind, the more complicated it gets, the more complicated it gets to understand what you want to say somebody who is looking into it occasionally. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
even nowadays, sometimes, for example, if you look at this at the comment field below, you see already 4 signs on the right hand side. I don't know what they mean. So it's there is a time where it gets overcomplicated that only the experts who have been working for this, who are doing daily reviews and labeling themselves, understand, and somebody who wants to read the results is getting lost.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. Thank you. So this is why why it might feel slow for some how we implement things, but I'm really cautious here because, so many people are asking, like, let's just add another button to do foo or bar or whatever. But yeah, we have to be careful where this will lead us, right? Janis?
There are many things right now in my mind, but if you go back to the details or
this one?
yeah, for example, here, isn't it like a first step, the most easy things to and where is failed 5 at the top on the this panel? Yeah, if you want like missing 2 tests from the last run or a percentage of some cover, like every time the job runs saves also the number of jobs run, and then you compare, you display this as a percentage or a number there.
We could. So this overview page is saying what's the results for the build for all the tests which had been scheduled, right? So as you can see now, it doesn't show any because there were no that are running. There are none that were scheduled but then skipped or obsoleted. You would only find it from the from the group overview page when you compare one build to another that something was missing. So I don't think we can actually include it in the test overview page because the test overview page behind that link is just the overview within one build, right? But this page here visualizes the difference between one build and another. Yeah, I think this job group shows an important example of a problematic case. Honestly, I think there's a better solution just based on how the tests are structured. I imagine if you treat all, I think the version is misunderstood here. Okay.
Okay, if you go to there are some settings for every group, right? If you want there a,
Yes.
option to add every group, every not
Like the
yeah properties, yes. If
yes.
you want there a percentage of jobs you want to you expect to run,
Right. And if that percentage isn't met, then what should we do? Like add some red sign,
yes,
right?
just a not yes notification, just an indication, not something like for first step. I don't try to go to the
Yes. Yeah.
absolute solution because it's gonna be too risky.
Yeah. Right. So what I'm thinking, so let me check with you guys. What we could do is we could actually add just another test result here. Okay? And maybe make it really distinct with a flavor. Let's say the flavor would say meta checks or build validation checks or anything like that. We can come up with a good name. And then a green or a red blob would show up. Let's say there would be another table above, another line, which says total number of expected tests. And then that is either green or red. If it's green, that means that the number of expected tests have been met. It could be test modules, right? It could be specific. It could be, could be both. And it would be red if the expected number isn't met. And then if you go inside there, you would still have a comment field. So in the same way that one is able to comment or label or add an issue with carryover for that specific results, then you could also handle this check. If any failing test result is blocking approval, then, then just override that based on your explicit decision. If you say, like, I know that the number is lower, we are treating that as a known issue, let's track it, but let's still go on. I mean, right now you can create those results already from the test distribution. Just put it into a module to check the other results. Would need some kind of synchronization approach, but still you can read the results. And you could put it there. Or we build that into some external tooling which feeds back the result into OpenQA. What do you think?
Not sure if I get it completely, but sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
I'm also not sure if I got you completely, but I think that this is the same issue that we had before. This works well for one individual test failure, but it fails at being a useful solution for the sheer amount of test cases that we have to review.
Okay, so let's then try to answer that question if we can in the past 4 minutes. If not, then we will follow up to that. So could you describe in more detail, can we visualize the example with the 6 failed results here, or is that not big enough of a set of failing tests?
We can try, but I'm not sure if
Mhm.
this really is
Right.
useful.
So,
Let's try.
so my approach of reviewing those test results is to say, well, in a first step, I don't care about the overall result. I care about, the to-do flag. And please tell me if that doesn't work for you and why not. And what I see here is that we have 5 failed ones. Why is it 5 when we had 6? Well, because one has this label already. So somebody made a decision that this was reviewed. Whatever that label means, it means that in the very first step, I don't need to triage that result because somebody already made a decision. I don't know what the label means. If it means that it needs further work outside or not, it doesn't matter because at this step, I don't need to triage results. And for those results here, meaning there is no label carryover, so it's not like the scenario failed in the very same way in the scenario before. So I need to investigate, maybe take a look into the issue tracker, and then put the right bug reference or ticket reference here. What I see is that builder failed 3 times. It's for different flavors, but it might be the same issue. So very likely, if I would investigate and if I would find that this is a valid product issue, I would create a coding bug on Bugzilla or try to find a reference, and then I would copy paste that into the comment section of all 3. And for the other 3 errors, which are in individual different modules, then likely 3 individual issues. And then the work could be followed on in those tickets by, QA engineers taking a look into test issues, as well as product development engineers taking a look into the product issues accordingly. But the very first step of triaging would be done if that to-do list is empty, right? And then the work goes on. Phoenix, does that work for you, or do you do it completely different, and why?
No, you said actually the key point of the thing. The first step of triaging is done, and this
Yeah.
is what is useful, but this is not where the review job stops. And
Right. Okay.
I'm trying to come up with an answer about how to advance from here, but
Fine.
yeah.
Okay. So we agree on the first step, which is the initial triaging. Then the next step is like, how do you follow on with the individual issues, and also what effects does it have on this build? Like, I just decided, is it a test issue or product issue? I didn't make a decision. Can we release the build or not? Right? Is that what you were thinking?
No, it's more complicated. It's more of the interdependencies. I mean, just looking at Builder here, you see this is a Azure only issue. Then the next question is, how long does it already persist?
Yeah.
Is this an issue that is only for one version, so you have to click to the other things? Is this an issue that is sporadic, that is just not showing up for the other cloud builds because of random things? Is this actually an issue that is, yeah, this is difficult to discuss at this point because there are many caveats that you need to include. This is why I failed to find a good approach to discuss this right now. But yeah.
Right. So, in other cases, we have OpenQA investigate issues, which automatically does a decision like, is that a sporadic issue? Is it a recent? Is it a test regression? Is it a product regression? The your team made the explicit choice to not have those automatic evaluation because, of course, it does incur some cost of running those automated tests. So in that case, you would need to answer the question yourself. But taking a look here, I would say, so it's not like immediately, it's immediately obvious that this is only showing up once. It could be that it shows up in previous pages, but it's not looking like that, okay? So I'm assuming that this is a significant regression which just happened in the build of today. I would say as long as we haven't digged further, I would not release the build because it might be a recent product regression just in that very build, right? Would you come to the same conclusion?
From this perspective, yes.
Yeah. Okay, right. So with that, let's make a pause here. Thank you all for your ideas. I noted down 2 or 3 ideas. Thank you for using that opportunity with me to share some thoughts, exchange best practices and such. Honestly, I was too lazy to look for new topics for the next workshop sessions, but we will have. Oh no, wait! It's actually simple. In the next week, we will have the SUSE QE Tools roadmap discussion on a monthly basis. So this will be the last one for this year. So I would be happy to present then what we have achieved in the last month of work period and what we plan for the end of the year and the upcoming time after that. If you're still interested, Phoenix, if you have time, I would be happy to after this workshop here stay a bit longer and chat with you about the problem that you introduced just in more detail. Well, until then, see you, thank you, and goodbye.